This is the Miller Philosopher. You ever wonder sometimes which Valar gets the worst reputation? I mean, there's just snark whenever their name is mentioned or hinted at. Nothing like blatant evil, like Melkor, but just an undertone of ribbing like, oh yeah, they were with that guy. I think there's one Vala in particular who gets the blunt of this, and the thing is, most of it is so subtle or almost set in proxy with other characters that you'd be forgiven for not really noticing it. That Vala being Aule. Now, if you're super familiar with Tolkien lore, then much of this will not come as a surprise to you, but otherwise it follows like this. Aule, along with Manwë and Umber, is one of the big three of the powers, and power scale wise he's not as strong as Melkor, but his powers and work were probably the most influential out of all the Ainur because his dominion, if you will, was the substance of the world. Rock, metal, minerals, everything that was solid and that you make things out of. And because of that focus, he is often depicted as a smith and a craftsman. I call it his dominion as being the most influential because it's his work that Melkor most frequently attacks and tries to bring under his influence more than any other. So what the hell am I talking about Aule getting snarked then? Simple. Most of the main antagonists throughout the franchise, I mean the real movers and shakers, have in one form or another some connection with Aule. He is literally the Kevin Bacon of the Tolkien universe. Sauron was formerly known as Mehron and a servant of Aule before he was turned. Fëanor was taught by his father-in-law Mahatan, who was in turn taught by Aule. And Sauron was, when he was a Maiar in Valinor, was also a Maiar of Aule. So that's 4 major players. Aule can't seem to get a fucking break here. And it begs the question, why does he have such an awful track record? Was he really that bad a judge of character? Or was there just something in how he worked and what he knew that was just naturally corrupting? Well, let's break it down. I think that a large part of this comes from the fact that Aule was first and foremost a creator. More than any of the Valar, except Melkor, he loved making stuff. That's why he's a smithy after all, always making new things. And this characteristic shows up most in the 2 groups most directly influenced by this mark, the Noldor High Elves and the Dwarves. All of them are known for crafting and making new things from the substance of the earth. And in this, I think it's fair to say that Aule was more of a brother to Melkor than Manwë was. After all, he created the Dwarves out of the same desire to create life that Melkor wanted to. The main difference, of course, being that Aule's ego never got in the way of Uru's desire or plan when Uru chose to intervene. And I think this is also why Uru decided to give life to the Dwarves despite not being part of the original plan because of Aule's humility. In contrast, Melkor had 0 humility, and more than that became a complete narcissist to a violent and extreme degree. This would also, too, explain why he had such a hard-on to destroy Aule's works most of all. The 2 were the most alike, apparently. But what about the others under his influence? What was their deal? Well, I think all 4 of the characters that were influenced by Aule in some way relate to the concept of creation. What I mean is that any creator, whether they be writers, artists, online content creators, songwriters, whatever, take a certain amount of pride in their work, regardless if others like it or not. Yet they also too desire to share that work with others in some way, shape, or form, whether for pride or just for the joy of making something. There was always a come see what I have made mentality running underneath it all. And it was that element that often got turned, I think. For Mehron, it was the greatness of his teacher's art was great, but not great enough. For Fëanor, it was the fear that the source of his achievement would be stolen from him. And for Saruman and Melkor, I'll just might as well bring him into this, it was a desire to make something of their own or that they felt they could do a better job of than anybody else. Also, too, along with the creative pride, was the aspect of new knowledge. After all, in order to create something, You need to know what you're making it out of and just need to know how to do it. You also need to have the imagination to foresee what you are making because it doesn't exist yet. You just have what's needed to make it. Contrast this with the elves and most of the Valar. Did they create in their own right? Sure they did, but within the confines of what they knew. It wasn't necessarily new knowledge, but taking advantage of the current knowledge they had and to make stuff from there. Aule and his teachings, however, involved more than just reshaping current materials, but also making new materials out of old ones that have not yet been imagined. I mean, look at the results. The primordial great lamps of the ancient world. The Silmarils being living jewels, able to catch and hold the light and power of the greatest work of the Valar, the true trees of Valinor. The Noldor creating the first written language and arms before anybody else. The Dwarves' ability to make vast cities and communities out of bare rock and caverns that could arguably rival even the works of the Noldor and Numenor. Sauron's ability to make new and dark creatures based on old ones that his former master had made. The very act of knowing how to create is itself great power. So in a sense, yes, you could say there was something corruptible in Aule's teachings. Yet that's not today what we would call evil. I know that the Silmarillion often seems to imply that knowledge and the thirst for it is a bad thing, and that the wise would know enough just to leave it alone. But I don't think it's evil, per se, unlike this hint that is implied. After all, abilities and desires in some way can be sourced to Uru himself. So if you're bold enough to say that knowledge is evil, then you should also be bold enough to say that Uru has evil in him as well. However, it's not just that. With the exception of Melkor, all four characters were turned via outside influences or pressures that then warped their chosen abilities. So, was Aule then a bad judge of character? Yes, but only in as much as the other Valar were. The First Age Valar were essentially divine children with all the naivety and innocence that children come with. Sauron was turned during his time after all. And Fëanor learned Aule's teachings, but not from Aule himself, so he's innocent there. Saruman, while being corrupted in Middle-earth, was not corrupted in Valinor, even if he had the ability to be corrupted there. All that happened afterwards. So, again, was Aule a bad judge of character? Yes, potentially, but at the end of the day, everyone made their own choices. If he does actually carry the negative reputation among the people of Valinor, then it's only because the power and knowledge that he wields and inspires is arguably the greatest of his peers. And also equally important to note that while his creations were not part of the original plan of the first and second born, that being the Dwarves, they also did a hell of a lot better than the first and second born did in Middle-earth as well. Neither Melkor nor Sauron could dominate the Dwarves, with the Third Age Dwarves that fought for Sauron probably doing so for their own ends rather than Sauron's corrupting influence as he had over people and elves, potentially. Also, there's no recorded major conflicts between dwarven houses in any age of Middle-earth. You don't get that with the elves and humans, who have fought with each other from time to time in major conflicts or events. And though the race did later lose conflicts with dragons and Balrogs, beforehand, during the First Age, they were the bane of the dragons. You can ask Glaurung about that one. So, despite his flaws, Aule also had more foresight than many others of his peers to best survive and make it in Middle-earth as it was. And I think that should be part of his reputation as well, rather than being known as the one who was always responsible or somehow involved in the failings and disasters of the world. But what do you guys think? Do you think Aule deserves the reputation of being a bad mentor? Do you think that he was just naive and eventually grew to grow out of it and became more wise? Do you think that Aule was the most influential of the Valar, and what do you think of his relationship with Melkor? Let me know in the comments below. And this is the Middle-earth Philosopher. You guys have a good day.